What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Bikes, Beers, and Bigfoot. I am John Patterson. That was the Ohio Howl. You'll notice that it was a little bit different than our normal intro, and that's cool. We're doing different things, trying different things. But I will say that was really cool because it was filmed, in Ohio, I believe, by Matt Moneymaker of Finding Bigfoot fame. So that is one of the cool things from Ohio that we've gotten. There's been actually a rash of recent sightings of the elusive Bigfoot creature. I'm not sure what that was all about. I'm still trying to do a little more research because it seemed it kind of just faded out as quickly as it came in. But the news cycles being the way they are, that's kind of how it is. So on today's episode, I just want to kind of put it out there. Am I a believer or am I not? I'm sure if you've listened to any of the episodes, yes, I do believe that there is a creature out there that is bipedal, that is man-like, but not man. And it is, in my opinion, a relic hominid of some sort. So that is one of the cool things that I will say that I've gotten the opportunity to speak with Cliff Barrickman on is, what he thinks it is. And so he's kind of the same mindset, but he goes a little more in depth with it. I'd love to have him on and really go into that and do a deep dive interview with him. But he said it numerous times. And if you ever get a chance to go out to the North American Bigfoot Center. Good Lord, I can't even speak today. Go out there. It's awesome. It's in Oregon. If you get the chance, definitely go. It is a great museum. Cliff is awesome. The other guys that work there are even more awesome. It seems like they're all willing to talk. Everybody's willing to have a conversation with you. It's good times, good people, and it's a cool area. So get out there if you get the chance to talk to them. And talk to anybody, honestly, about Bigfooting or the cryptids that are out there. So one of the things for me is, the sightings. They are incredibly interesting to me. Not only from the fact that obviously somebody's seeing something, but there are so many different things out there that people have seen, that people have identified. And they're from all different walks of life. They're from totally different areas. And if you go all the way back and start looking at like the early counts of what was going on and different things that were happening, the cool thing about it is that it's not just people in a certain area saying, "Oh, I saw this monkey man," right? You've got people that are so far disconnected, have no way culturally that they could have been anywhere near each other. They couldn't have shared information or anything like that, and they're having encounters and describing a creature, and it's all very, very similar. I mean, you don't only have the North American Bigfoot, right? So I mean that's the big one. Everybody knows Bigfoot, right? So you got Bigfoot, Sasquatch, that they call it more in like the Canadian area and that sort of thing. You got the skunk ape from down in the Florida Everglades, the Ohio grassman, as it's called here. And then you've got different variations of a similar creature in different areas. You got the orang pandek. You've got, oh man, there's so many. I mean, the Yeti obviously is another big one. And there's just so many different things out there that it's like, okay, to me, it's like, if it was like a one-off or you get a couple kooky people out in the woods, okay, I can see maybe it's just, somebody out there pulling our leg, right? But there's so many different sightings. There's so many different accounts, and they all line up so well, and they all describe a very similar behavior, a similar attributes, similar, surroundings a lot of times. And so then you have to step back and think, okay, is this some sort of weird mass hallucination on a scale the world has never seen? Or is there something to this, And so for me, when I was young, my dad is big into the sci-fi stuff, would always watch sci-fi things. And then I do remember, I think it was like an episode of In Search of or something like that with Leonard Nimoy. I think it was In Search of with Leonard Nimoy. And they were going on about the Bigfoot and that sort of thing. And I was enamored. I was totally, I was like, I was in hook, line, and sinker. You got me, right? Because it was so fantastical and so fascinating to me that I had to know and learn everything I could about it. So that's what I did. I just kind of like kept that at like the forefront of what I was doing as just a research type thing. So, I mean, obviously I wasn't in the field researching. I'd like to start doing that. It's one of those things that you can either get out there or you can't. Especially with me traveling, it's difficult to do with my job, but it's one of those things that I do want to start trying to do that, and like getting out there and meeting people and going to these different events for Bigfooting and just really diving into it in a more field research type of aspect. I do know that there are, Bigfoot, conferences and Bigfoot festivals and stuff all over the place. In fact, the first time I met Cliff Barrickman was at a Bigfoot festival in Hocking Hills, Ohio. And, of course I'm there, I'm like fanboying out, that sort of thing. And he's like, I'm just another dude, I'm just a regular guy, and he really is. So, that's one thing I will always say about Cliff is he's awesome. He's very easy to talk to. And I mean, talk about somebody that genuinely loves the subject matter of Bigfoot or Sasquatch, and that's him. I mean, he can totally light up a room with the way his passion is for the subject, and I think that's just so cool. It's so awesome. And I think there's a lot of people, there's probably a whole generation of Bigfooters out there thanks to Cliff and what he's done. As well as other guys out there. You get, Bobo and the other guys, because you got to think. So I'm of the age that finding Bigfoot, that was the thing for me, right? Like that was just so cool. Now, I mean, was it Hollywoodized and just, kind of, out there for ratings? Yeah, I get it. You know what I mean? But, at the time it was nothing like that had ever been done. Nothing like that had ever happened before. You never had people out there that were really just, doing that sort of thing. And then you've got so much knowledge with all of those people. And the fact that they tried to bring in somebody from the outside that was like in the scientific realm with Renee to try and be like, okay, I'm going to be like the voice of reason here. Because the funny thing with about Matt Moneymaker is, everybody always says, well, it's always a squatch. It's always a squatch. And some people are like that, and it doesn't matter what the sound is. You hear a twig break, it's a squatch, But it was really cool that they did kind of had that approach where they had somebody who was trying to be more scientific, use the scientific method, Again, it was a TV show. It is what it is. But still, it brought a lot of light to both positive and negative to Bigfooting and the Bigfoot world. I know a lot of people probably have, negative things to say about it, but at the end of the day, it did bring a lot of people to it that probably wouldn't have otherwise been into the subject, and it was a novelty for me as well. I really did like, watching the show and stuff. And then, as I got more into the subject matter, it became less, it just became more theater to me at some point, which is fine. I mean, anytime that you're involved with TV networks or anything like that, that's what you're going to get. They're after ratings, they're there to make money. So you take it with a grain of salt, so, but, another good source that I really like is, so you got, Seth Breedlove with, Small Town Monsters. And, he's got a real good group of people over there. And they do a lot of cool documentaries. They have a whole documentary series around Bigfoot. They even have it on the Dogman as well. So if you get a chance, go on YouTube, check those guys out. Small Town Monsters. And they have a tremendous library of videos and documentaries out there, and it's really, really cool content. So, again, I'm not paid by any of these guys. This is just stuff that I watch and stuff that I do and things that I like. So I'm just kind of put it out there like, hey, I get some information from here, I get some information from there. These are the things I enjoy, So that's just one of those things that I'm really enjoying right now is all of the new documentaries, all of the different things, all the different approaches that are out there. Because you got like the what is it, the Pacific Project or the Olympic Project? That's what it is, the Olympic Project up in like Washington area, and that's really cool. That is really, really cool. I really like what they're doing there. They are building a tremendous amount of information, a great database. They are really bringing the science to the Bigfooting. So anytime that you get a chance to really go look at what they're doing, and Small Town Monsters does a lot of interviews with those guys. They do a few documentaries around those guys. They even do one around Cliff and his museum there. If any chance that you get, really look into those guys. They are really doing it big out there, and I really like what they're doing. And I think, honestly, for me, that's why it hasn't gone away. You know what I mean? It's not like it was, back in the day, some people saw some things and then that was it. Just some crazy old people out there drinking or something, Consistently throughout time, we have had different encounters. We've had people that were seeing different things that were very similar to, past accounts. We have had people... And another part of it, too, is there's a lot of accounts out there from people that they really have nothing to gain, and that actually a lot of them have quite a bit to lose, when they come forward with their Bigfoot encounters or with their any encounter that they have, because it opens them up for ridicule and that sort of thing. And so when you got somebody that has like a high standing, or like police chiefs or even just police officers, those encounters, I really enjoy hearing those, because these people they have a lot to lose by going on the record and saying, yes, I've seen this, I believe this is what I saw, I know it wasn't this, or I know it wasn't bear, or whatever. And so, not to mention, you've got that, and then on top of that, especially with like police officers and that sort of thing, they have a very analytical mind. They have to, given their line of work, they have to be able to analyze evidence, analyze the situation, and really, break things down. And so when you have, your police officers that are saying, hey, look, this is what I saw. It wasn't a person. It was definitely not a bear. I don't know what it was, but this is the closest thing, and I think that's what it is. And so there's a plethora out there online and other media formats that you can find of encounters that are described by police officers that have dealt with these sort of things. So that's one of those things that you really need to take into account, because it's not one of those situations where again, it's just some crazy Billy Bob out there high on the corn whiskey, and he's just having a good time, and he thinks he saw something. These are people that are, sober-minded. They're very, analytical. A lot of people have a high standing. And so these are people that are seeing something. Something is being seen out there. Whether the, scientific community at large really wants to take a look at that or not, I don't know why, but They really need to. That's why, the late Dr. Jeff Meldrum was such a great asset to the Bigfooting world, and he leaves a very large void. He truly does, because he brought an expertise, and he brought an analytical and scientific approach to things that is sorely missed right now. And I pray that the scientific community really kind of looks at what he did and kind of picks up the mantle. I'm sure that there's going to be somebody out there, and I hope they come soon, that will pick up that mantle and really start taking it further than even Dr. Meldrum did. So it's been an amazing journey for me to be able to see and hear all of the different encounters, and then to kind of like go to some of the different places and see, you know, how wild areas really are. Because a lot of people don't realize, because they live their very, you know, normal lives around the cities and that sort of thing. They don't realize how wild some areas truly can be. I mean, there is a lot of wild area in New York, right? So you go through New York, and when you say New York, everybody instantly, oh, New York City, right? They're like, oh, well, there's not going to be a Bigfoot there. It can't be. It's New York City. But there's upstate New York is a very, very vast wilderness. There's a lot of wilderness there. And there are a lot of reports from upstate New York in the area. So there are a lot of things that a lot of people don't understand, because they just really don't kind of have the big picture of it. You know, they think very small, you know, right there where they're at. You know, well, I haven't seen one walking across the street here at the Duke station, so it can't be real. Well, okay, we'll go out in the woods a little bit and see what you can see out there, because there's a whole lot of craziness out there, you know. But, I mean, for me, I don't know. I don't know that you could change my mind on it, is kind of what I'm getting at. You know, at this point in my life, the encounters that I've, you know, read, and then all of the other encounters that I've watched, you know, documentary wise, my own encounter that I've had, I don't think that you could change my mind on the fact that something like that exists. What it is, I mean, that's still open, you know, until, unfortunately, it's going to be one of those things that until, you know, we have a cadaver laying on a slab and can definitively say this is exactly what it is, science, I don't think, is going to really give it the light of day that it needs. And so I'm not saying that I would necessarily advocate for somebody going out there and killing a Bigfoot, but it's one of those things where it's like, you know, it's almost, okay, what's needed? You know, would it be the sacrifice of one to save the rest, or how would that situation be? And that right there will spark a whole different kind of debate, you know. So obviously in the comments, it's probably going to go nuts, but it's one of those things where, you know, you kind of have to think objectively for a moment and say, okay, obviously I don't condone, hey, let's go out there and hunt these things down. I don't, you know, because I think they're very closely related to human. And, you know, it could even be a situation where it could be something like, you know, biblically, it could be descendants of the Nephilim, you know, and it could be something like that, because even in the Bible, it does talk about a race of giants and great beasts and that sort of thing. So who knows? Maybe it's something that's come down, you know, in lineage from that. At this point, because we don't really have a definitive answer on it, it's all speculatory. Now, where I kind of draw the line myself is when you start getting into the weird, out there supernatural type aspect of it. You know, that Bigfoot is interdimensional, and that it can cloak itself and do all these different things. I don't necessarily read into that myself. That's not where I'm at with it. And that's not to say, if you are, that you're some kind of crazy kook. I'm just saying that's just not where my belief is on it. I believe that it's a flesh and blood creature. I believe that there are very few of them, even to a point where it's probably good to be considering it like an endangered species. I do believe that they are naturally camouflaged. I mean, it's one of those things. I mean, you know, experts will often say that, you know, when they were out looking for like guerrilla troops and stuff like that, that they could be 5 or 10 feet away from a gorilla, and if that gorilla didn't want them to know it was there, they wouldn't know. You know, it's that type of situation. And if you got something that is truly a master of its environment, which obviously a Bigfoot or Sasquatch would be, an absolute master of its environment, you're not going to know that thing is there if it doesn't want you to know that it's there. I mean, think about it this way. We know bears exist. We know for a fact that bears exist. I've seen a bear in the campground at one of the spots where I was working. I know that they're out there. I've seen them. But it's one of those things that if you're in the woods and the bear is there, you may not know it. You could be 10 feet away from that thing and you may not know. Now, there's a lot of people out there, oh, well, you can smell them. You can smell them a mile away. And there's a lot of incidents like that where people were saying the same thing about Sasquatch, where you could actually, I've heard a lot of people describe it as like a wet dog smell, Bears, on the other hand, I've heard a lot of people say that it is, you get a mix of that, like that wet dog smell, but then you get a lot of like old trash. It's weird. I don't know. And that comes from like hunter friends of mine that have spent a very good amount of time out in the woods and have been around bears and stuff before. So I understand that they can definitely have a smell to them. I mean, that's why the skunk ape is called the skunk ape, because that's what they say it smells like, is like a skunk. So obviously it's environmental, to me. When you have something like, say, up in like the Pacific Northwest, where it's a temperate rainforest, essentially, then you're more likely to get like that wet dog smell, I would think, because, well, it's probably going to be wet. It's going to be getting rained on. When you're in like Ohio, that sort of thing, that's not usually the case. That I've noticed with sightings and encounters. It's not usually the case that there's like a smell. It's not to say that it's never the case, obviously, but it's not, always the case, or it's not usually the case. Let's say it that way. So you've got a situation where environmentally it's going to impact it, which you would think, if it's a live flesh and blood creature, that would be the case, that it would be an instance where the environmental impacts would determine the outcome of the encounter. So if it's a wetland area, it's going to be marshy. Then you're going to have probably more of like that skunk ape smell. Or if you're like in the Pacific Northwest, where it's more of like a rainforest type situation, you're going to get like that wet dog smell. And then, in other areas, it could be something else, because the environment kind of, depicts that, and it's really, really crazy that to me, the science is just, that's just phooey. It's not real. Let's look at it. Just look, prove us wrong. That's all I'm asking. If you're so sure that it doesn't exist, if you're so sure that this isn't real, that it's something that's just out there, that, don't worry about it, it's not real, don't worry, just get it out of your head. Okay, cool, prove it. Prove without, without saying that, well, the lack of evidence is the evidence. No, that's ridiculous. Because you know what? We all know, the first thing we're saying, well, we would have found a body by now. Okay. All right. How many deer carcasses do you see laying around in the woods? Now, you see them on the side of the road, because they've been hit by a car or something. Okay, cool. Yeah, I get that. But you go out into the woods, how many deer carcasses are you going to see? How many bear carcasses are you going to see? Well, I'm waiting. You're not going to see that many. Why? Because the forest does what the forest does. Nature does what nature does. And when you're talking about, a group of creatures that is very small number-wise, probably in a few thousand, you know what I mean? You're not going to just sit there and see dead bodies laying all over the highway. It's not like the millions and millions of deer that we have all over the place. So to me, that's a completely ridiculous claim. Oh, well, we didn't find a body, so it can't exist. Okay, whatever. At the same time, there's a lot of environmental things. There's been nests that have been found, right? And so when experts look at these nests, they say, hey, this looks just like the lowland gorilla nests that they make over in Asia. Okay, well, we don't have any gorillas here, so what would be making that nest? Do you think Jim Bob's just going out there and hitting the corn liquor one night and he's like, I'm going to go make me a nest somewheres? No, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. And it's one of those things where it's so far out there, the chances of somebody finding it are astronomical. And you're telling me that somebody's going to waste their time and go out there and do that? No, that's stupid. So let's cut the BS at the end of the day and say, look into it. You know what I mean? We're out there, we got guys out there that are, like I said, the Olympic Project, they are getting environmental DNA, they're getting footprint casts all over the place, they're documenting with photos and audio and all of these different things because you just refuse to do it. Get off your duff and go out there and apply the scientific method. And then, in a few years when you're like, hey, there's nothing there, then we can be like, oh, okay, well, I mean, hey, they tried. They went out there, they looked for it, they, took all of our advice and all of the information that we gave them, and there just wasn't anything there. Okay, maybe then we can have that conversation. But this whole thing where they just want to sit there in their lab at some university and say, oh, no, that can't possibly exist because it's not in this book. Well, how many things weren't in these books 30 years ago, 50 years ago? It's like, come on, man. The whole point of science is to be inquisitive. That's the whole thing about science, is to question everything. That's the whole point of it. I mean, come on. It doesn't make any sense to me why the scientific community at large is like, meh, forget it. I mean, that to me is a conspiracy in and of itself. It's like, how can you be so obtuse about this? There's something out there. Somebody somewhere has decided, well, it's just not worth looking into. Why? Is the government involved? Who knows? There's all sorts of craziness out there. That's a whole nother rabbit hole that we could go down. If you want to, let me know. We'll make a whole episode about the conspiracy side of Bigfoot. But that being said, I still think that there are a lot of things out there that we can point to and we can see and we can say, hey, there's some evidence here. This kind of makes me question it. You know what I mean? Especially when you got people who go into it skeptical and then, they come out of it thinking, okay, there's something here. Case in point would be, Les Stroud, Survivor Man. I will say, I love the show Survivor Man. Absolutely loved it. And then he did Survivor Man Bigfoot. And I was like, that's my jam. I love that stuff. That is awesome to me, especially when you hear the stories of when he was filming Survivor Man, because he talks about an episode. I think he was on like the Alaskan coastline there. He was filming an episode there and was hearing, if I'm not mistaken, what he said sounded like something grunting at him, off into the distance a little bit. And other like, weird, odd sounds and that sort of thing. And this is a guy who literally makes his living surviving in the woods and recording it, or, surviving in the wild, I guess you'd say, and recording it. So the guy knows animals. He knows what the different sounds are. I mean, this is his life's work. He understands this. And he's saying, hey, there was something out there that I don't understand. That it made me question things. And then he did a whole series called Survivor Man Bigfoot, where he would go through. He went with, I think, what was that guy's name? Anyway, so he went out and did these different expeditions, I guess you'd call it, in different areas, and kind of was like coming up with his own conclusion of what he thought this was, and so. Again, that's another thing. I mean, Les Stroud, I'd love to talk to you. Oh, man, would I love to talk to that guy. I mean, it wouldn't even have to be about Bigfoot. I mean, obviously, Bigfoot would come up. But, I mean, the guy is so kind of just, worldly, I guess you would say. He's experienced so much and he's done so many different things out there. And you have to look at that and say, okay, you've got somebody like this that clearly is not, just everything's a Squatch type guy. He's very analytical. He's skeptical coming into it at first. You know what I mean? And even he's like, hey, we should probably look into this. There's something out here. Like, there's something going on. Do I know what it is? No, I'm not going to say that I do. And that's what's great about it is he's not going into it saying, well, this is exactly what it is and blah, blah, blah. You know, he's very open about it, which is all that we're asking of the scientific community is, hey, be a little more open to the concept of this might be a thing. Maybe, just maybe, it's a thing. So let's look at it. It'll be a good time. You know what I mean? Anyways, off my soapbox. So to wrap things up, for me, I'm a believer. Brandon, he's not so much a believer. He's open to it. I do know that. He's got like different theories of what he thinks it is. And so we'll dive into that more the next time we get him on the show. But I will say that there are things out there that I've experienced, that I've witnessed personally, and you're not going to change my mind on it. And so I'd love to hear about your guys' experiences, your encounters, your you know, where you stand on it. You know, is it real? Is it not real? If it's real, what do you think it is? And if it's not real, what is your reasoning? Why do you think it's not? I think that'll be a cool story and a cool conversation to have there in the comment section. But for this week's roadside confession, I want to talk about, you know, the times that we've all had out there where you didn't follow your gut. Like your gut was telling you, hey, don't go down this road, or hey, you know, make sure you bring this with you, or whatever the case may be. And you don't listen to it, and then you regret that decision. For me, oh man, it wasn't with a bike. It definitely was not with a bike. It was with a car. It was one of those situations where it was like, hey, I think I've got this thing fixed. I know I'm good with it. I'm going to go ahead and drive it an hour away. And about halfway there, I am regretting that decision really bad. You know, it was one of those things that the car just had a random misfire. I couldn't get it figured out. And I thought I had it figured out. I thought I had it situated. I had replaced a couple parts. This was back before I really was much of a diagnostician. I was more of a part slinger at the time, as most people were. So we, you know, took off down the road, and sure enough, man, it went. And it's like, good Lord, man. And by the time it's all said, by the time I'm getting back, my catalytic converter was cherry red. That's how it was just dumping fuel and igniting. It was such a pain in the butt. Got rid of that car because it was a piece of crap. But, you know, everybody has that situation, you know. So, you know, in the comments, why don't you guys talk about that? What was one thing that you didn't listen to your gut, bike related, car related, it doesn't matter. You didn't listen to your gut, and you ended up regretting that one. You know what I mean? That'd be a cool one. Let's talk about that in the conversation down there. And for our segment of what was that, I'd like to talk about one of the for me especially, one of the most well-known sightings for Bigfoot out there is the Patterson-Gimlin footage. If you haven't seen it, do yourself the favor, go look it up. It is, to this day, the most controversial footage, I think, of Bigfoot that's available. It also happens to be pretty cool that it's got my namesake of Patterson in there. So that's another thing. I don't know if I'm related, but if I am, cool. You know, that's the way I'm into it. I'm into it. I'm here for it, man. And I'd love to meet Bob Gimlin. That dude is a legend in Bigfooting. But I'm not going to do a deep dive on it right now. But it's one of those things that sighting, it happened in October of 1967. You know, so you got the Bigfoot kind of thing is going. And what's crazy is that footage was shown in theaters. You know, there are people like, you know, my dad's age, you know, he's in his 60s, and, you know, they remember going to the movie theater. Like, imagine they went to the movie theaters and saw on the big screen the Patterson-Gimlin footage. I'd like to see that just out of the sheer excitement of it, you know, knowing what it is and what it's been. And it's one of those things that, I got to tell you, man, for me, the Patterson Gimlin footage is like the holy grail of footage, for Bigfooting. And, again, I go back to like Dr. Meldrum and others who have analyzed that footage, and because there's a lot of people, it's just some guy in a monkey suit. They just paid some dude to go out there and walk around. The problem with that is you have people like Dr. Meldrum and others who have analyzed this frame by frame, broken it down, and they have said, definitively, there is no way that is a person in a suit for numerous reasons. Now, Dr. Meldrum, he studied like the locomotion of people, like how bipedal movement operated, how people walked. He studied, that was like his main area of study. I'm sure I'm butchering what it's actually called, but that's what his main area of study was. And so he was looking at the gait and of the creature and its movement and how everything moved in relation to the creature, and so he broke it down and went into the how the mid-tarsal break. You could see how the foot was moving and everything like that. And it was just all of these different details that to the untrained eye, someone like myself, who's not, a doctor, in that sort of field of study, I'd have no idea. You know what I mean? I did, now if you really look closely, you can see, like muscle ripple and you can see like on the quadriceps, the big large muscles in your legs, you can see those things actually moving, like if you really look at the footage. And to me, it's like, okay, in today's day and age with AI and that sort of thing, sure, you could probably fake something like that. Yeah. Because there's a lot of deep fake AI stuff out there that I find myself like, is that real? It could be. I don't know. But you're talking 1967. 1967, they didn't have that kind of technology back then. And I'm telling you, 1967, look at Planet of the Apes. That's their monkey suit, okay? That's how close, and you could see clear as day that wasn't a real gorilla. It wasn't a real bipedal Bigfoot type creature. You know what I mean? And, for me, and it's always been one of those things that I always bring up. So, the Bigfoot in that film is called Patty because it's clearly female. It has pronounced and visible breasts, right? Why, if you're going to fake this, let's just get into the mindset of hoaxers, right, for a minute. If you're going to fake this thing back in 1967, at what point, sitting around a fire drinking beers with your buddy, you said, hey, to make this thing real, let's throw some boobies on her. Hell yeah. That is the dumbest. Well, I mean, come on. Why would you think and make them anatomically correct? You know what I'm saying? Like the amount of detail that would have went into something like that, amongst other things in the suit, right? It blows my mind. And then you've got people that are like, yeah, it was some dude in a suit, man. I saw it online. The guy admitted to it right before he died. Oh, okay. Do we have a suit? Because there's been other people who work in Hollywood, some of the best, I don't know what makeup artists and that sort of thing in the business, in the business, some of the best ones out there, right? And they sit there and they look at it and they're like, I couldn't make that now with today's technology. And this was like, 15 years ago, 10, 15 years ago. They're like, I couldn't reproduce that now with what I have. There's no way that they made it back then. But still, you got some people that they refuse to wrap their head around it or open their minds at all to anything but it was just some random guy in a monkey suit and they're just doing it to make a bunch of money. You're going to have that. So, there's that. And so that kind of brings me to my last segment on the rubber side down. We talked about, regretting, not following your gut. When you're out on the road, we're riding, we're traveling, we're doing anything, trust your instincts, man. Just trust your instincts. If something's saying, hey, it's time to go. And it's time to go. You know what I mean? Don't push that envelope, especially when we're on two wheels. You know, some people have a lot more skill. Some people have a lot more, ability than others. And so trust your instincts. If you're out there, you're riding with your buddies and things are getting crazy and they're wheeling and doing all sorts of stuff, and something inside you saying, hey, time to go, follow your instincts. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, we all want to get home safe. We all want to be able to ride again. And we all want to be able to see our families and see our loved ones. So from me to you, from us to everybody out there, all you riders, keep the rubber down, keep your eyes forward, and stay on the road. We love you. We'll see you next time. Have a good one.